For the 11th, 2025. The time is 21 minutes to 11 British. That means, as always, one thing, that there are very many F1 centric threads at which we need no must pull. We've got to talk about the impending danger, Pirelli settings, the bloody gravel traps that they've installed, a sharp digging holes and lines in the bloody tyres. What are we doing? Carlos Sainz has talked about the FIA scrap them and install the Sky F1 pundits, Jolyon Palmer, Corinne Chanduk settings. I say to you this, Carlos Sainz, be careful what you wish for. So too, we've got to talk about Yuki Tsunoda, talks that he's negotiating a contract potentially. And so too, Yuki Tsunoda out-qualifying his teammate, some chap, I don't know his name, Matt Verstappen, I don't know, he's won a couple of championships, something like that. So too, this fella, Maximilian Verstappen, talks about retirement potential, depending on what happens in 2026 and the rules and regs. We will talk about it. We'll talk about Max Verstappen's cheeky mistake in SQ3 at the critical times. Max naysayers are saying bottle job. Speaking of bottle job, we'll talk about Lando, Norris and the mistakes that he made, uncharacteristic ones given his form coming into the championship rounds, the final two races of the season. Deep gravel cuts indeed. Max, no talk about chickens today. I saw you guys going back and forth about the god tier pollo. Go on then, let's get into it, because this is important, chap. We are only a couple of hours away from an all-important 8-pointer of a sprint race. It will be important. Why? Because currently the gap in the drivers' standings, 24 points between Lando and his teammate Oscar. So too, Maximilian Verstappen, 8 points is up for grabs later on in the sprint. It's not the main course though, is it? That's just the aperitif, the starter per se. Qualifying later on will get techier than techie things for a couple of different reasons. Red Bull have dropped the ball again, seemingly on the Maximilian Verstappen side. There is something wrong with me at the moment, and your boy has zero enunciation. The Maximilian Verstappen side of the grid, what is going on? They flopped it, didn't they? But again, one man's failing, one man's misfortune is another man's good luck. Here's what you get. Yes, techie, I don't hate this tweet. Listen, I'm fuming, raging that of all times Yuki Tsunoda chooses to pop up and show face, make himself count. It's now. Why now, Yuki? This is the one time that you needed to get out of your own and therefore Maximilian Verstappen's way, and this is the time that you choose to out-qualify Max Verstappen. What are we doing, chat? First time in 400 and something days, by the way, that Maximilian Verstappen has been out-qualified by a teammate. What are we doing then? 440 days, and now Tsunoda-san decides to turn up. He's quick enough to be dangerous, this chap, but it's not Max, his points haul, that you need to be taking bites out of Tsunoda-san. It's Lando and Oscar's, for crying out loud. It's so frustrating, but this is a very good tweet. Tsunoda-san's getting his gangster on, and I can't hate it. Finally, Tsunoda-san delivering on his not insubstantial promise and or potential. Oh, and by the way, important, since we're talking about Tsunoda-san, that we address the rumour. For the longest time, I thought Tsunoda-san was gonzo. No deal. Honda are paying Red Bull $20 million US per year for him, Tsunoda-san, the Japanese, to drive in that balls that are red car. Now, we thought that since that deal was coming to an end, that Aston Martin will be the engine manufacturer of Aston Martin as of next year, that potentially Tsunoda-san has nowhere to go. Where's he going to go? What, you think he's going to depose Lance Stroll, the son of the owner of the business? I don't think so. There's been a lot of rumour that Tsunoda-san next year will be at Dale Coyne Racing, DCR, potentially in Indy, potentially. However, reports this morning suggest that there's negotiations ongoing last minute, that potentially there were talks between Honda and Racing Bulls about securing him for an additional I don't know what's the listen, I don't know. Maybe if Honda are due to pay up, maybe if they stump at an extra $10 million US, then ultimately cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar bills. Let's talk about this danger stuff. This is techie. What is going on here? Now, I understand you've got to punish the drivers. You can't have these runoff areas that don't that almost incentivize the drivers to go off course. Mention no names, turn one at Mexico. There is no penalty for going off there. So what do you think drivers are going to do? Therefore, they will run off if indeed they have the opportunity to gain themselves even so much as a millimetre of durable competitive advantage. Here, however, Qatar's gone a bit techie. They've punished the drivers, but the gravel is sharp. And so in analysing, when Pirelli take the tyres off of the previous session, they analyse them. SWOT analysis, right, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and potential threats. Under the guise of potential threats, all of the tyres on the back of yesterday's sessions are bloody damaged. Got these massive lines in them. Now, Qatar, Losail as a track is very technically challenging, particularly Sector 3. I mean, there's these long radius, medium to high speed, long duration turns, and they're always going to take a toll as far as the tyres are concerned. But now, on the back of the 25 lap limit, there's potential for reds and safety cars and lots of yellow flags, not just because of the tyres, but when these guys and girls, the stewards, unpaid by the way, are picking up the debris. So sharp is the bloody gravel on the runoff track. What are we doing here, chat? Non-rhetorical question. Why as the FIA, the regulatory body of a billion-dollar sports franchise in Formula One, why are we here always having these conversations as if this is some sort of a science project in secondary school? Why? Makes no sense. And to that point, Carlos Sainz says of the FIA, the stewards, when they're talking about these incidents, mention no names, the Brazilian Grand Prix, Oscar Piastri, Kimi Antonelli, Charles Leclerc, he says that potentially because he's seen Jolyon Palmer and Karun Chandhok analyse some of these instances and apportion blame properly, Carlos Sainz suggests that maybe you might want to get in Karun Chandhok and Jolyon Palmer and Anthony Davidson as stewards, because 9 times out of 10 they apportion blame correctly, says Carlos Sainz. Most of the time it's just an actual racing incident. Listen, Carlos Sainz, let me tell you this. It's important, chat. Be careful what you wish for. Now, I don't think Karun would take the job up, nor would Anthony Davidson, nor Jolyon Palmer. For the most part, they've got cushy jobs. And this is the problem, right? If you're going to get good stewards who can adjudicate in a way that's true and fair, you're going to need to pay them properly, handsomely. Talking big 6 figures. Can't roll out bloody travel and expense and a couple tickets. What are we doing here? Billion-dollar sport that is F1, 24.5 billion US dollars as far as its market capitalization as of the time of writing, and you're going to pay the stewards in crisps and orange juice. Like, what? It is laughable. It is laughable. So if you're going to get Karun, how much do you think Karun's on? 100, 200,000 a year, maybe. Jolyon Palmer similar. So you're going to have to pay them more than that if you want them to be stewards and jet set around the world at every single Grand Prix, 24 race weekends a year of 52, taking time out from family and loved ones and their kids. You're going to have to pay them handsomely. So maybe 0.5, 500k might do it. Karun would probably sign up then, but are the FIA prepared to do that? That, Carlos Sainz, is the exam question, and I think not. Or Mohammed Ben Sulayem under his reign of terror, some might say. All he's concerned about is the profitability of the FIA. No Bill Belichick settings to be seen. Just do your job now. By the way, got to talk about Maximilian Verstappen, because he's talked about potential retirement. This is nothing new. This is not me breaking news. Max Verstappen's always said that, listen, after my first championship, 2021, all the rest is me playing with house money. That potentially, if the 2026 rules, if I don't find them to my favour, if they're not fun, then potentially I might sack it off. Nothing new from Maximilian Verstappen. Here's what he said, quote, "My contract runs until 2028, but the future will depend on the new rules in 26, and if they are nice and fun. Winning 7 titles is not on my mind, not front and centre. I know that there are 3 more years after this one, so it could be possible, but it is not something I need to do before I leave the sport. I have a lot of other passions, other racing categories. I want to spend more time with the family and live off my own schedule. I don't see myself stopping and coming back. Once I stop, I will really stop." That's Maximilian Verstappen talking for some say soon to be 5-time champion. Oh, the humanity. What do you make of that, chat? I tell you this much. F1 needs to make sure the rules are fun for Maximilian Verstappen, because if he leaves, chat, now, oh, the humanity. For a rising Max Verstappen tide floats all F1 boats. Don't believe me, where you saw when he went over to NLS what it did for them. The viewing figures did one of these. Everybody's interested in sporting endeavour par excellence. Would I like that Max Verstappen leaves Formula One? I would put forth this supposition, Max and Max fans. I feel like there's scores to settle. I feel like there's a couple of years left in the old dog yet. 28 years old. That Max Verstappen fella, not too bad. And I think he's got a lot to offer to F1 yet. And still, 2021 rekindled. If Lewis Hamilton can get his SH1T together, Lando now coming up, it will get techier than techie things. Now, to Maximilian Verstappen's context, going into this sprint race a little bit later on, Helmut Marko said a couple different things. In the first instance, he said that Max was really quick on the mediums, but as soon as he put on the red labelled soft compound tyres, all of the pace went to pot, porpoising settings, what McLaren underwent at the previous Grand Prix in Las Vegas. All of the bloody dynamics and handling of the RB21 went to pot, and that's why Yuki Tsunoda was able to out-qualify him. He said that the SQ3, Dr. Helmut Marko speaking here, by the way, that the SQ3 slump in Qatar came down to ultimately the interaction of the RB21 with the soft compound tyre, causing heavy bouncing, porpoising, and leaving Max only in P6 after strong pace on the harder compound tyres. Tsunoda-san somehow avoided this issue and out-qualified him. Oh, the humanity. What are we doing here? Now, Maximilian Verstappen, naysayers, will cry mistakes, bottle job settings. I would put a pin in that, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, until you see them fix for Max Verstappen's underfloor. Cheeky mistake, true, uncharacteristic of Max Verstappen. But once they fix the bloody underfloor, put a brand new set of soft red labelled compound tyres on that Max Verstappen car and fix for the setup, I think we'll be having another conversation in a couple of hours during qualifying. But I digress. Oh, and by the way, there's a lot of chatter around McLaren here. Listen, the context is important here. Zak Brown and Andreas Stella have been doing a PR tour, a press tour ad nauseum, talking about their unerring dedication towards rules of engagement, egalitarianism, kumbaya McLaren GP, all friends and mates around here, that they would never ever pick favourites, even if it meant 2007 happening again and them losing the championship. That's Zak Brown's words, not mine. But I smell something. Forgive my sceptical hippo face. Why, Zak Brown, would you do a bloody press tour? Why are you overcompensating for the perception of the public that you're trying to desperately sandwich Lando Norris into a World Drivers' Championship box that his skills might not fit just yet? Why? So open and honest, non-rhetorical question. And then you see this. Let me give you the context properly, because this is important. Said they would never do it right. And then Oscar Piastri, last race, Oscar Piastri put the bloody tweet out talking about Bernie Ecclestone, saying that, of course, Matt McLaren are going to favour Lando Norris. There is more commercial value in him. He's got that glint in his eye, the cheeky smile, all the commercial sponsorship. Bods love him. That's why you see Lando Norris front and centre in the Hilton adverts, Ralph Lauren, Air Wallets, Monster Energy drinks. Where is Oscar Piastri? Nowhere to be seen, because the sponsors love themselves some Lando Norris. To that, Oscar Piastri said that there was a conversation, again, going back to McLaren, saying that they'd never ever pick favourites, that they want both of their drivers to have the opportunity. Oscar Piastri early on in the season said he doesn't want any favouritism. He doesn't, when he had a gazillion points on Lando Norris, he just wants to have a fair shake of it. Then McLaren decided that they were going to give Lando Norris suspension upgrades and suspension geometry upgrades so that he could better handle the car, mitigate for the understeer that kills Lando Norris's lap time. All of a sudden then, Lando Norris 1.0 fades to black and Lando 2.0 arrives, becomes a god tier driver, chases down Maximilian Verstappen, could put in a Monaco qualifying worthy of the racing gods. The first lap around Monte Carlo, sub 70 seconds. That's what happened to Lando Norris. Andrew Benson speaks to this on the Checkered Flag podcast. When you're talking about Oscar Piastri's material downturn in form, you can't view it in isolation. Part of the story is the resurgence of Lando Norris now that he's got his feet under the MCL39 table, has the steering feedback that he so needs and desires. So too, you got to tell that story underneath the aegis of Maximilian Verstappen's resurgence, brand new floor upgrade. That's what's happened to Oscar Piastri. Couple mistakes in Baku, of course. Singapore cheeky love kiss with his teammate that didn't fare well, didn't necessarily didn't spur him on to greatness. That affected Oscar Piastri's mental going into the final, dying embers, the third of the 2025 season. But with all that being said, remember Zak Brown said that he would never ask his drivers to pick favourites. They would rather lose. Well, tell me that's hyperbole without telling me that's hyperbole, because Oscar Piastri prior to this weekend's Grand Prix had this to say. That we had a very brief discussion on it, and the answer as far as favouritism, whether I will cede and bend the knee to Lando Norris, is no. Oscar Piastri says, I'm still equal on points with Max and got a decent shot of winning if things go my way. Why then, Zak Brown, would you have a conversation, chap? If you've already said before the world's press and media that you will never pick favourites, that you would rather lose per McLaren in 2007 than pick favourites. What do we do? Then why have the conversation? I'm calling it. There's something going on here. Is that not a contradiction in terms, if ever you've seen one? And to that, Maximilian Verstappen said, mate, if they ask me to do what they're asking Oscar to do, I would tell them to F off. What are you talking about? No, there is no chance. How very dare you talk all of this gubbins and then when we're at Monza, ask me to tow Lando Norris into Q3 because he's made a mistake. How very dare you? 5.9 second pit stop. That's part of motor racing. Sometimes the racing gods will turn their back on you if you interject and put your thumb on the weighing scales of competition in Formula One. Sometimes those things happen. Karmic justice never sleeps, 24/7, front row seats. Sometimes that's going to happen, and that's what Oscar Piastri said in Monza. I thought we said that mistakes were part of racing, so why then are we inverting? You'd come over and told Max to do that, as Red Bull did back in the day, 2022, Brazil, when Checo Perez was desperately fighting for a vice championship of the Drivers' Variety, second place. Max was like, I told you already. Don't even ask me. Checo Perez will never beat me again after he yeeted it into the barrel quite deliberately in Monaco to secure himself 25 points in a brand new contract. Then he'll never beat me. Don't even come over on the radio and ask me, because that's what champions do, some say. Now, to the accusations of bias, of course, Zak Brown's done his tour and Andrea Stella, they've been saying all the right things, the exam answers to the bias exam questions. However, sometimes a picture tells 1,000 words, right? Look at this, chat. I'm telling you, you cannot write this. Oscar Piastri polls it, and he was always going to be gangster around here. In his two previous showings around Losail, the Qatar Grand Prix, second and third. In previous Formula, he's never competed a Grand Prix around here and been off of the podium. Ergo, Oscar is very good around here. When you see the track, you understand that in Sector 3, them their turns, prime time Oscar Piastri territory. Those are his natural habitats. Zak Brown said as much, that he's braver through the high-speed turns than Lando Norris's teammate. Even into turn 4 yesterday, you saw him doing the hacksaw Jim Duggan on the old steering wheel. A nice little correction. Said that it was a sweaty palm, squeaky bum moment. But again, looking at it, he makes nothing of it. So able and competent is OJP in his ability to correct in medium to high speed turns. Now look, this is why this is important, chat. Oscar Piastri bangs it on pole. Why then do McLaren look like they're at a funeral? And again, sometimes you go, let me argue the devil's advocate case in this instance first. Maybe they just cut, maybe the timing of the shot's wrong. Maybe production have done an editing job and are trying to spin us a yarn, sell us a narrative that doesn't exist. Maybe this is a cheeky shot of McLaren far earlier in the session than when Oscar Piastri put it on pole. Maybe they've done a Netflix Drive to Survivation on us, maybe. But maybe they haven't. Maybe that's in real time as Oscar Piastri just crosses the finishing line. And that's true. That's a true representation of McLaren's reflection of their emotions, seeing Oscar Piastri drop it on pole. So invested are they in who? In Lando Norris nailing himself a championship. I don't know the answer to these questions, chat, but I think that's techie. A picture, some say, speaks 1,000 words. So if this is out of context, was Lando's side of the gap, potentially Miami, potentially Lando's side of the garage also, yeah, maybe as well. So I don't know. Zak Brown might be crying. They do look depressed. Maybe it's techie this. It is techie. Maybe it's me putting on a tinfoil hat and being ever so slightly conspiratorial. Can I miss Lando Norris 1.0? But why do you miss him? I thought we saw him as recently as yesterday. There were a load of mistakes. Let's talk to this then. There were a load of mistakes from Lando Norris. And listen, he's been brilliant the past 3 or 4 Grand Prix. I never thought for a second that I would see Lando Norris 2.0 rock up at Mexico, 800 meters into turn 1. A dude that can't get a start for love nor money, dial the proper RPM in, get his elbows out, defensive posture settings going into turn 1. I would have bet my life savings that Lando Norris was going to get nobbled into turn 1 by all and sundry, 3rd or 4th place at best in Mexico. And what did Lando do then? Lando 2.0 rocked up. He was perfect, dialed in the requisite RPM perfectly, not too hot, not too cold, Goldilocks and the 3 bears, just right, Lando Norris. And then he was brilliant bloody in qualifying. I mean, it wasn't a perfect qualifying then for him either, but in the dying embers, in the clutch times, drops it on pole. So it feels like Lando Norris 2.0 is here to stay, right? He's been brilliant. And then you get yesterday, and it was mistake central, weren't it? He was all over the shop. Mistakes, going off wide all the time, as near as makes no difference. I counted about 3 or 4 different instances of Lando having a cheeky conversation with the gravel trap. What are we doing, Lando Norris? This is clutch time. Don't be a LeBron James of Formula 1, sir. Don't be that. And again, everybody has to go through their growth period, and I get it. LeBron eventually got it over the hill. I get it. Maybe I'm being a bit disparaging, but a young LeBron, the critique then was that he doesn't have a clutch gene. Are we having that same conversation now about Lando Norris 1.0? It's techie, cheeky switchback. I hope not OJP. It's too quick. Well, is it too quick? It's too quick a turn 1 to do any switchback. The cheeky right. No, I don't think they can do it. So here's what Max Verstappen said. You will recall. He had a conversation with Chris Medland about the reasons why he's still in the championship. 104 points was the delta between him and championship lead then Oscar Piastri as of the summer break. Now, Max Verstappen is level with points on Oscar Piastri, 24 points behind Lando Norris, the championship lead. To that point, Maximilian Verstappen said the following. Roll the clip.
Another one, but we also have to be realistic. We are in this fight still because of other people's failures, not because of, if you look at the whole of the season, what we did. Yes, we did really well. We have really maximized pretty much all races before the ones that I mentioned. But if we would have been in the position of how dominant of a car they had, let's say like that, championship would have been over a long time ago.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is chaos from Maximilian Verstappen, for some say soon to be 5-time champion, GOAT settings. That he said that if he had the McLaren MCL39, that the championship would have been over a long time ago, that the only reason why it's still alive is because they keep making mistakes. Mentioned no names, Lando Norris yesterday, McLaren, cheeky disqualifications at the altar of excessive plank wear, Oscar Piastri, Baku. They've been making loads of mistakes, these chaps, across the piece. Not just Lando. Lando's been good past 3 or 4s. News makes no difference. Perfect. But across the season, they've made a load of mistakes. Mention no names, Lando Norris, Saudi Arabia. Now, Max Verstappen naysayers will point at Max Verstappen's session yesterday and say, well, everybody's human. Even Max makes mistakes. And whilst that might be true, I'm telling you, put a pin in it and let's revisit it in a few hours' time when we get to qualifying, where hopefully they're fixed for his underfloor and set up the car properly. It will get techier than techie things. Speaking of Lando Norris's mistakes, maximised failures or sabotage, source it's techie. F1 God's got to hold Max's hands to the championship. Jomo says, go on then, let's talk about these Lando Norris mistakes. Because there were a couple in the session in sprint qualifying that were worthy of note. A couple of cheeky offs, but those happen when you're pushing right. The point of those FP1 sessions is due diligence of the mechanical and aerodynamic variety. You go hard to the line and over it to see how you can set up the car, the extent to which you can push on plank wear, ride height settings for this is the ground effect era, and that's how you derive 80% of your aero. It makes sense, therefore. However, in the dying embers of the session, there was an instance with Lando. Again, you need clean air in Qatar, do you not? So why would you let somebody pass you as you're about to embark in the dying embers of a qualifying session on a hot lap? Lando Norris 1.0. This is the communication between Lando Norris and his race engineer, the one that they call Will Joseph. Roll the clip.
Oh, good. It's your own fault for going out too late.
You let Albon through, mate.
Yeah, no, you're good. My bad. My fault. Oh, good. It's your own.
What? Oh, the humanity. What is going on, AK? T-Racer, I have no clue how to react to that. In the first instance, Lando says, yeah, it's okay. It's your fault for going out so late. When he says to whom was he speaking? When I listened to it first time round, it sounds like Lando Norris 1.0, self-deprecating, self-chastising Lando Norris's back, that when he says he's talking about me. If I went out too late, then that's what you get. You're always going to get impeded around a Qatar. That's what I thought listening to it first. Second time round, it sounds like he's talking to his engineer. That's what you get if you go out too late. That's what you get if you... It sounded like he was pointing a finger. Culture of zero blame. Like, what are we doing here? That's why Will Joseph comes and says, what are you talking about, mate? The only reason why you didn't have track position and clean air, therefore, is because you let Alex Albon by. So what are we doing then? It's okay to make mistakes and drop it off. Like, do you know what I mean? Sometimes your car doesn't find itself on the black stuff when you are pushing. It's hard to keep it on the island in the dying embers of qualifying when you're pushing, doing due diligence and trying to establish the parameters within which you can optimize for the setup. I get it. I can't chastise Lando Norris for those offs, of which there were many, 3, if I recall correctly. But that, if you're about to push for a qualifying lap, and again, it's the dying embers, championship rounds, final 2 races of the season, and you just let Alex Albon go by. What are we doing here? I just can't. I've got to listen to it again. I must be in a... This has to be the Matrix or something. Roll the clip again.
Oh, good. It's your own fault for going out too late.
You let Albon through, mate.
Yeah, no, you're good. My bad. My fault.
I think he's being sarcastic. So I think the fact it's your own fault for going out too late. I think that is aimed at Will Joseph and the McLaren team, because who decides when they go out? Ultimately, Lando will have some input, but the team, that's him pointing finger at the team. And then ultimately when Will Joseph says, mate, had nothing to do with when you went out. It had to do with your defensive posture and allowing Alex Albon to go by you. And then comes the cheeky, not infringement per se, but then you don't have any clean air. Lando, you, says Will Joseph, have to take some responsibility and accountability, that you cannot absolve yourself out of blame in this circumstance. You need to hold some corn. Here, Will Joseph's tone is frustrated as well, fuming, cheesed off. It's techie, that. It's techie. You don't need this fractious circumstance going into the championship rounds. It's going to get techie later on. And the question, for me, the exam question of the day is whether Lando Norris 1.0 shows up or whether Lando Norris 2.0. If 2.0 shows up, Houston, we have a problem. The championship is done. It's finished. Lest we forget, Lando only needs to finish the Qatar Grand Prix weekend, round 23, being 2 points ahead of both Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen to seal it. Only 2 points. But I'm not sure at this juncture whether he's caught in between a rock and a hard place. I don't think you can play damage control. You can't. That damage limitation isn't the order of the day for Lando Norris. He's got to go for it. Remember at Singapore last year when he started to play defence and then he nearly yeeted it into the barrier twice. That's what happens when you play defence. You've got to stay locked in, got to dial in. You have to be in your flow state, even though Lando Norris can nearly touch this championship of the drivers' variety. Got to lock in. I think it's intriguing, this. I think it's really, really intriguing. I want to see whether Lando Norris rocks up. And ultimately, listen, he doesn't need to do much. He needs to avoid seizing defeat from the jaws of victory. And he has himself a driver championship. But I'm not, listen, on the back of that, listening to that, I think it's going to get a bit techie, then techier things later on. And then you find out Lando will have a good start because Max isn't next to him. True. But I mean, what does Tsunoda, Sandy, Frank? I don't know. Who knows? It's techie. It's been techie at turn 1 into Qatar for the longest time, right? Also, only the sprint. It's a good shout, Max. It is a good shout. Max, as soon as engineer and driver are not in sync, things go wrong. Additional pressure. T-Racer says 100% agree with Cam. It would be amazing if Lando, Oscar and Max would be riding 6 points from each other for the final race. Yeah, I would love for it to go into I mean, we've been blessed. It feels like peak F1 ever so slightly, right? We have been blessed that it's gone so far, so deep. Again, per Maximilian Verstappen, had he been in that McLaren, I think we would have been in for a very boring, monotonous season. Max would have wrapped this up about 10 races ago. Yuki So2 has nothing to lose apart from a contract. Chat, I listen. If I were Lauren Mekies, I'd be like, Yuki, you know, do you know what we need for you to do, mate? Make up your own mind, chap. Do you know what I mean? Worse things have happened in Formula 1. More score, Douglas mentioned no names, 2008. Crashgate, Nelson Piquet and Fernando Alonso, Flavio Briatore. Worse things have happened. More score, Douglas, of things have happened. If we're having this conversation in a few hours' time and there's been a massive turn 1 incident, I wouldn't be surprised. Yuki has a new power unit. About bloody time, Max. And it's about bloody time that Yuki Tsunoda stood. Will the real Tsunoda-san please stand up? Please stand up. It's about time. But it's a shame for Max Verstappen fans all over the world that it's Max, his points haul that he's looking to take bites into, and not Lando and Oscar Piastri. It's going to get techie than techie things. Listen, we go live 30 minutes before the sprint as per usual. Between now and then, what are we doing? Yeah.